We are super excited to have Rachel Anderson here with us today. She is the owner of Pivot Studios. She's a fractional chief marketing officer. She's a speaker. She was at South by Southwest. She is a book author. Lots of amazing, exciting things. And we are super proud and excited to have her here with us today. She's going to talk to us a little bit about AI and all the tools that we can be using as small business owners and entrepreneurs to make life a little bit easier for us. And so, like I said, as you have questions, come on and put them in the chat, and then we will let Rachel get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to be here and talk to you a little bit about AI. I don't know about you, but it feels like even in the last 6 months, things have just changed drastically, and it's really hard to keep up sometimes. And so what do we do to know exactly what to do? And that's really, I feel like, always the question as business owners. So really, here's why you should kind of stick with me through this presentation today. It's all about the return of investment for your business as you think about AI and how to incorporate that in. Because the ROI gap between AI winners and losers isn't really about the specific tools, but it's about your strategic choice for how to put them in that's going to deliver really sustainable growth for you, your teams, your departments, and even your customers. And that can really just be a simple 15-minute exercise that we're going to get to so that you can get going and figure out exactly what works for you. But first, let me tell you a little bit about me. I have more than 15 years in marketing, and even more than 20 in leadership roles. And so, as part of that, I worked with a lot of different businesses, from the small mom and pop shops to startups and corporate and government and nonprofits. Basically, you name it, and I've probably had a little dabble here or there in one of those industries. As Anna mentioned, I'm currently a fractional chief marketing officer, which is pretty much just a fancy way to be able to say that you're a part-time marketing executive for hire. I'm also a leadership trainer and speaker and author, but really right now I spend a lot of my time with these three core businesses that I have. One is called Startup Women NC. It's all about a community for women to help support throughout the startup ecosystem here in North Carolina. The human-centric leader, which is part of my leadership brand about training teams and cultures on a human-centric approach. And then why we're here today, the marketing spot, how to help businesses figure out their sales hurdles through marketing endeavors. And that's where AI can really kind of come into play. And so for today, as we talk about this, I'm going to give you a little overview here. First, we're really going to get on the same page about AI. Where is it coming from? How new is it? Why is it evolving so quickly? Then we're going to talk about why it matters to your businesses, and how you can be strategic and in control of it. And then we'll talk about a few of the risks and really that 15-minute exercise to make sure that you have a plan that will be able to use AI in a way that really matters for your business. So we're going to start with what it actually is. First, what really is the basics of AI, and that's that it is a software that can learn patterns from data and make predictions or decisions based on those patterns. And the conversation around patterns there is probably a really key part of understanding how AI functions. But what it isn't is not a creative thinker. So it really can't do a lot of the creational and creative thoughts, thinking through problems, handling customer engagement, deal with unpredictability of the emotions that come up in business dealings or even customer interactions. All of that really unique sauce that makes your business special, AI can't do that. And so if you want to preserve that, that's great because you can't have it replaced. And so as we kind of deep a little bit further in, I keep hearing this narrative of, AI is so sudden, like it's just now coming up. It's this thing that like now we have to deal with and it's changing the world. And it might be. But here's a little bit of a history on AI so that you can really see how it's evolved over time. It went from a rule-based system to today's kind of more sophisticated tools that we can use to really understand that natural language that the computer uses and that human use. And it really is about generating content right now. And that content can look like a lot of different things. It's not just words, but it kind of generates things based on pre-existing boundaries. And that started all the way back in the 1940s. There was something proposed. It was just an idea, neural networks, the possibility that they could be in existence through the technology that was. And that's really just the idea that a machine can use data to talk like a human. And as time kind of slipped forward a little bit, they developed something to test that called the Turing test. And it was just a person's ability to figure out, can humans detect if a machine is talking to them? And at this point, it's like a twinkle in the eye of possibility. And obviously, no machine is going to be able to pass that test. And so as we go a little bit further, the first actual neural network computer is built called SNAR. And so they're starting down this path. Now, this was in the 50s. That was 70 years ago. So we've already been on a long trajectory of what it looks like to develop AI into our business and into our kind of society as a whole. In 1956, AI became a field of study officially, so people could get degrees and education in it. That was through, I believe, Dartmouth. And then even in 1957, there was something called perceptron, which was the first network that was capable of learning. And so now we see that not only is it an idea and then it gets established, but now it can actually start figuring out that there's gaps in its own knowledge and working to learn for new behaviors. And then in 1960s, we have ELIZA, which was the first language program. And then even something called GPS, so General Problem Solver, which is one of the first AI programs that engaged as if it was actually human in the ideas of problem solving. And so then we have kind of a big jump. Not that there wasn't things happening, but in 1997, IBM is a big player in this world. Something called Deep Blue defeated a chess world champion at actual chess, which involves problem solving and figuring out kind of like the patterns of things and predicting human behavior, right? So it's starting to become very sophisticated and being able to see how to be used in really practical ways. And then in 2002, iRobot introduces Roomba, which frankly, I heard about this and didn't even realize it was AI. And so when I saw this in the last few years, I was very surprised that that was part of the AI narrative. But it basically used AI to figure out a navigational system throughout your home and started to learn where you have furniture and where things are placed so that it doesn't run into it. And then even further, 2011, IBM Watson defeats former Jeopardy champions. That made the news. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that was a really big deal. And then we start seeing integration into some of our current tech. So YouTube videos start having something called DeepMind that could identify what cats look like. In 2014, Facebook created DeepFace, which was the facial recognition system. And we started to see similar things pop up in our phones and apps, right? My bank still is like, hey, can we use your face? And I'm always like, no, I'm paranoid. And so you'll see it, pop up into Facebook and all these other areas where it's like, hey, you don't need a password anymore. We can just use you. And then finally, in 2020, OpenAI released GPT-3, as it was called at the time. But it wasn't until 2022 where that really became central to the public. And I think that's why we really feel like there's this acceleration, is that even though in the last 70 years we've had so much momentum with building AI and figuring this out, wasn't a new idea. It was not until it really hit the mass market where people realized they, as an average person, could deal with it, do something with it. And two, as businesses, it started to change the shape of how we engage with other people, with authenticity, with the ideas that we could do maybe actual more with less. But there's honestly way too many moments after 2022 with companies launching AI tools to know really what the most significant next step is. We're still probably going to have a hindsight 2020 on that. And so that's still to be decided. I want to say, the main point, I think, in the history, other than I tried really hard not to go too deep and nerd out because not everybody likes all the deep history of how we get to where we are like I do, but is that we're really just seeing it evolve over lots of decades. And right now, you get to choose what you want to do with it and how you want to use it. And that's really the main reason why we're here. So let's go back a little bit into automation versus AI, because I've worked with a lot of companies over the last 15 years that did a lot of automation. And I think one of the pitfalls for businesses now is that we see those sometimes as the same thing, automation and AI. And while there might be some overlap, they're not necessarily the same. And so first, automation executes predefined tasks, really. And they can do that repeatedly and with some variation. So think about, email autoresponders. That's an automated workflow that you've put together, an automated setup. That's automation. Or maybe there's a customer support phone tree. So think about when you call, Spectrum or whatever internet service you have. It would never be the city of Raleigh. They're perfect, but we'll stick with cable. They'll say something like, hey, thank you for calling us. Press 1 for this, press 2 for that. That's really just a telephony version of automation. Or you could even think about your scheduled social media posts. If anybody uses Hootsuite or HubSpot or any of the ones that kind of automate some of your sending and posting after you've created something. So those are all great examples of automation. And now we're slipping into the AI. So how does that same kind of set of things look like if we add the AI approach? So AI itself adapts and learns based on what parameters you've given it. So that email system, maybe instead of just having it say out of office or thank you for your inquiry, we'll be with you shortly, the email system can prioritize messages based on your past behavior. So it's watching you, it's learning, it's figuring out a cadence, it's analyzing data, and then it's giving you order and system and process from that. Or instead of press 1 if you want this, press 2 if you want this. Maybe it detects who's kind of on the phone. Maybe it's through email or information or phone number. It remembers conversations that you've had. It can prioritize what path of customer service help you might need based on the last times you've called. And then it can give you what you want. Or in the case of social media, it can analyze all of our engagement. It can optimize what time you post, or maybe make content variations for you, and then tailorize, that's not a word, but tailor your messaging, right? So all of those ways we can take plain automation and make it AI, which includes still automation. And I think that's why sometimes we have some of that overlap. So in other words, if you think about it, the definition of today's AI is a machine that can make a perfect chess move while the room is on fire. That was from Fifi Lee, who's a co-director at Stanford in the Human-Centric AI Institute. And what I think is so fascinating about this is that she's not saying that it can tell that the room is on fire. She may not know at all unless you tell it that the room is also on fire and you need to triage as part of the way that you engage with AI. What it's saying is that right now, the capacity of AI is that it can make the perfect chess move while the room's on fire because it can't sense that. It can only use the data that's right in front of it. And so this is a great example of the greatness of AI and still the acknowledgement of limitations with the possibility of what's to come. I don't know. I feel like anything's possible in the world, so I can't really forecast. I'm not that good, but at least right now we have constraints. So here's what AI can really do effectively. It's great at processing really large amounts of data. So all of your customer information, especially if you have clean data. It's more difficult if you have dirty data, which is basically just like overlaps, mistakes, things within your data pool. Maybe it's about customers or locations or projects that are maybe overlap or duplicates or things that are just not quite all put together. It can generate content drafts, handle repetitive customer interactions, all that kind of stuff we talked about. But there are limitations. So it lacks that human judgment piece. Who is this person? Can you offer them a discount because you know they're in a hard time? AI doesn't know that, right? They just know that if X, then Y. If they ask for this, they go this person, or this is our program and this is the behavior we issue. They can't do creativity and emotional intelligence. Basically, you train it to do exactly what you want it to do. And the businesses that see a lot of success with AI are using it as like alongside human expertise, not as a replacement. So they use it as a pairing together, not as something that can push out the person that needs to manage it and look after it and make sure that it's doing what it needs to do. AI won't really replace your teams overnight. My personal belief is that it will never fully replace your people. It'll just morph what they have to do. And with part of that, it could free up tons of time and opportunity for you and your business, and even for your employees for what kind of strategic or more heavy lifting work really needs to happen. And so the best way here is to really think of it as a positive addition to an already positively positioned team. So if you already have good flow and people, it's going to be a great tool. When do you not want to use AI strategically, or when you don't use AI strategically? There's definitely some potential drawbacks that you'll have to consider. So first, if you rely on manual work and you don't want to use AI there, then you could be losing hours. You could be having more burnout on your team. You could miss other growth opportunities as they come. If there's inconsistent, there we go. If there's some inconsistent output, you could lose viability and disengage buyers and audiences. Potentially, there's lack of clear AI strategy, then you might fall behind competitors as they figure out how to scale with that AI tool. There's also increased brand risk. So, how do I operate without safe, effective AI guidelines if I'm going to use it across multiple different touch points within my business? And then finally, there's just risk of falling behind. Really, if you fail to upskill yourself and your team, then that could be something that leads to layoffs or attrition, or even just customers going to find that kind of X factor that maybe they don't realize is AI in a different competitor. And so I think probably that's why you're all here today, is because you recognize that AI is really critical and you're looking for some of those insights on how to use it and put it together. And so let's start talking about some of what that data looks like. When you do want to use or do decide to use AI strategically, you can automate routine tasks. So that on average could reclaim you about 122 hours a year for any high impact work or even innovation that you want to do instead of those really routine or potentially able to be automated tasks. You can create consistent quality output. It is really good at being able to do that within some parameters, and that could engage audiences more effectively and build brand trust, which is really critical. I tell a lot of my customers that trust is primarily built on consistency, not as much about this like one perfect thing. And so being consistently imperfect is often a preferable choice to being perfect once or perfect rarely. And so AI can really help you with building that kind of trust. You also want to make sure that you are implementing clear AI frameworks. And so there was a study done that said 93% of AI using small to medium-sized businesses reported revenue growth. And so they have a direct line to making sure that you can make more money for your business as long as you have that strategic approach to AI. And then finally, it really invests in your team's capabilities. You become a magnet for top talent. You become someone who is on the cutting edge of being able to give your employees or give your team members the edge in their own personal career growth. And that can put you in the top echelon of all businesses that are really engaging from a leadership down approach, what it means to have AI be a part of your regular and consistent business use. And so from this, strategic AI adoption isn't really experimental anymore, even though we're experimenting with what it looks like. It's part of your actual competitive advantage. The key here is that you do this really strategically. Every tool you bring into your business, whether it's a physical tool that is, metal and you hold it, to a digital tool, has a potential point of failure. And I think that that's a really important thing that we forget sometimes as we try to move really fast as smaller business owners, to do new things or optimize our processes or figure out how to reach more customers. And so you should ask yourself things like, what will I do if this tool goes down? What if it breaks? Who's there to fix it? What's something else that you need if this no longer works for you? Do you have a replacement? Do you have a backup? Who is going to take care of this in the long run to really understand where to put it, how it works, what kind of nuance is there to make your business better or your process better, and who's going to fix it if something goes wrong? Those are all things that we really need to think about before just maybe arbitrarily choosing some AI that we think is going to help us in our business, just kind of slowing down a little bit and asking from that more macro perspective of business strategy. And without that strategy, really, you put yourself at significant risk, which none of us want. And so I put together kind of 4 steps for you to build an effective AI strategy so that you can choose your tool that really fits the problem and decide to build it into your business with purpose. And so let's talk about that first one. The first step is really having a strategic foundation. You want to align your AI decisions with your business goals. So before selecting a single AI tool, successful businesses are going to clarify what metrics they're going to use and what the business outcome is that they really want to improve upon. So basically, your problem. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And that's what you want to get clear on. We see that companies who use strategic planning processes are 12% more profitable than those that don't, and that 90% of organizations will fail to implement something new because they lack that strategy or commitment to the strategy as part of that process. So that's a pretty compelling, at least to me, reason to kind of take that step back before we make what seems sometimes like a really easy decision. When I've been working with some of my clients across different industries, I've really found that the most common implementation failure on new processes or technology isn't really the technical side. It's really that strategic side. If the business purchases AI tools, or even if they're free, implements them in without getting clear on that problem, then you really have to deal with some strategic gaps with either tech sprawl or lack of clarity or resource sprawl, right? Like your employees start using it without a lot of direction. And so their time is being wasted or at least distracted from other things that you need to achieve or make money for. And so it can really be a tricky thing. I do this a lot, kind of this 3-step kind of flow through with my customers. But basically, you want to think about it like this. So business goals should dictate strategy, and then your strategy determines the process you need to use. And sometimes that's the biggest puzzle that you're really putting together is that stage. But once you do that, that's when you can select appropriate tools, AI or otherwise, to really solve those process problems and hurdles that you have. And this really prevents the common kind of solution in search of a problem thinking, where you hear from a friend or a colleague or another business owner that they're really finding a lot of success in X. And you think, yeah, I could use that too. But if you don't have that same awareness of the framework, the strategy, the process, then that actually can be a red herring. So really start with your existing framework and ask, what are critical business objectives? What are your sales and marketing bottlenecks? Because that is a huge area of opportunity for AI. How do you currently measure your success from any of your strategy or your processes? And then from there, those AI initiatives should directly connect to those answers and really give you clarity on why you're looking for something and what kind of tool is going to meet that need, even sort of like almost like an RFP or a specs list. So that's really the first step of building that foundation. The second is process mapping. So many businesses are trying to implement AI without having that documented process in place, like we talked about. And this is like trying to automate chaos. Like you're putting something in and you're like, just have all the chaos go into the funnel, but not all funnels are created the same. And so it will simply amplify your problems that you currently have, which maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I mean, it's one way to figure out where some of your employees are having problems or where your business is a little sticky, but maybe not the preferred, right? If you can avoid it. And so my approach is always to begin with mapping core processes like sales pipelines. That's one of my favorites. You can also do content creation workflows. You can do your product builds. You can do customer journeys, which is incredibly important, especially if you have brick and mortar or a B2C company. You can also do data analysis procedures. How is this flowing all the way through? There's sort of this I don't know, utopian world that marketers exist in where we think all data can talk to each other at some point in the hypothetical future and be one mecca for like beautiful, rich details and analysis. And I think, AI in this way gets us close, but it never is going to work without us really understanding how the process works and how all those tools are connecting. And so that's really what you're looking for as part of a data analysis anyway. And then for each of these processes, we want to identify three key elements. The first is what your bottleneck is, then what is a manual touch point that you can potentially automate, and then the strategic decision for actually how you're going to make that decision on what is and what's not, because that could be a bandwidth problem, that could be a personnel problem. Either maybe you don't have the right person or you don't have the right trained person. That could be a resource constraint. So making that framework and then looking at what the Venn diagram says with those three things kind of overlapping. And that implementation does need connection. So as that process first approach helps you figure out what kind of AI you're looking at, like I just kind of talked about, you want to look at your work sprawl, your tech sprawl, and really think about what is the thing that could potentially endanger the rest of my employees or the rest of my business from being efficient. Here's my best warning. The implementation of disconnected tools can create more work than they eliminate. So just make sure that you're thinking about that really cautiously and doing the due diligence to make sure that your systems are in place to support AI and AI as a tool. And so if you haven't already done some sort of a mapping exercise, that's a great place to start. We'll have something here in a minute, that 15-minute framework that you can also use to kind of give an assessment on your business. But these are great places for thinking about what's missing that you need or could use to support that AI. Next is really targeting the right use case and doing that really thoughtfully. And so not all AI use cases are going to deliver the equal kind of value. And it's hard to recommend one perfect AI for each business since the use case of how you use it or why you might need it can really vary. Businesses should focus on identifying 20% of possible applications with AI that will deliver 80% of business impact. And if that sounds familiar to anyone, like it did to me when I was first reading about this, I was like, oh, that's basically every leader's dream is like get your best people to focus on the 20% of things that will make you the most amount of progress forward in that 80% of business impact. So if you're like, yeah, that's a pipe dream, I can never do it. Yeah, me too. Okay. I always try, but it's hard. It's tough. AI does make it a little bit more possible if we think about it within its strategic approach. And so it's a great place to start. It's really important so that you can focus on high impact uses first and make sure that those are the things worth automating first because they'll have the biggest impact to your overall business. And here it says, a lot of the companies that have decided to do that have seen the return on that investment of time and effort, even getting all of that AI set up, right? It's not just the AI going in, it's all the time and effort it takes to get it in. They see that as a 2.1% or 2.1 times ROI, return of investment, give back. So it is worth it if you can identify the high impact use cases. If you're using the low hanging fruit, that may not have that same kind of impact, right? Because it's a little bit less meaningful to the business, right? If you're asking quick questions or kind of these other things. Not that it's not good and helpful, but using it as a like strategic AI implementation within your business. And so how do we really do this? We're going to use 3 R's because why not? So there's repetitive tasks that consume significant time. That is an excellent way to look at AI and how that might be able to alleviate some of that repetitiveness. There's revenue impacting processes. So, like I said, sales pipeline is one of my favorite things to kind of look at. This is a great place for us to say, where are those high touch moments that if I automate, it'll be a little bit better. I was talking to one business leader who has a chat bot on their website that pops up, and they got lots of inquiries through there, but marginal kind of return on that investment until they put in AI that allowed them to respond within 30 minutes to that inquiry. And they found that the faster they were able to respond, the higher percentage they were able to close the deal because that person was in the frame of mind in that exact moment that they wanted to talk to someone, that they had the problem, that they had time to look for a solution. And so that's a great example there of how that revenue impacting process can be a great opportunity for AI to enhance what you're doing. And then finally, those relationship touch points. Where do you touch the customer? How can you make it personalized and have that experience enhanced so your brand isn't just about providing a product or service, but you as the company become that differentiator in how you engage with them in the relationship you build. And so in marketing, I find lots of different places that we can kind of do this. But I typically find that you deliver the fastest ROI in things like content optimization, those predictive customer segmentations, maybe those competitive intelligence moments where you're really trying to analyze other businesses so that you have intelligence to be able to make strategic decisions, and of course, performance analytics. And so there's lots of ways that you can kind of see what your personal business's high impact moments are and where that could potentially help you. And so from there, we go on to our fourth and final step, which is really road mapping. So now you're going to move into execution. And what does that look like to reasonably implement your plan that you've made so far, the bottleneck identifications that you've made? And so a comprehensive AI strategy really can't happen overnight. And if it does, then I'd say you've either like really worn out your team or you probably didn't choose the right high impact thing because high impact usually means a little bit of complexity and time to be able to do really well. And so research shows us that 41% of organizations report measurable value in adopting an incremental AI approach and experience measurable gains as part of that, which is great because that means you have time to implement it so that it's implemented really well. And you have as decreased amount or opportunity of potential problems because of that incorporation into your business as possible. So I really recommend a phased approach, one that you can use that builds momentum and that you can see wins because you want to be able to see some of that investment right away, right? And so as you do that, it can avoid wasting time and money for you, your team, your business, and you'll be able to know for sure if you did the right thing. A slower implementation process allows you to also make a quick exit, right? If you realize you made a bad choice, a wrong choice, or maybe just a choice that's better for later. But if you go really fast, it's hard to stop that proverbial speeding train, right? So here's really the roadmap for implementation as you get thinking about this. First, the foundation. You want to establish the processes and metrics. I know I feel like a broken record here, but process is so important. There's only three hurdles in a business: people, process, technology. People is usually it for me. I mean, it's the way things are, but process, or only because people touch everything, right? So it's like the umbrella of all the problems. But process is incredibly important, and people and processes can fix the technology problems. So that's why I really keep talking about that process. Then you want to go into testing where you can implement maybe 1 to 2 changes within that high impact use case, right? So we're thinking slow and strategic. Then go into expansion. How can I expand it more within that high impact use case? Or maybe it's that you've done the whole implementation. Now you want to expand it to other parts of your business or other high impact use cases. And then finally, integration with the rest of your business and the rest of the programs, making sure everything talks together, making sure all other departments or people know how to engage with the thing that you've just developed. And so as part of this, measurement is really critical as you implement so that you have tangible data to know if what you've done is putting you forward, or maybe it's just making it stagnant, in which case, if it's costing you money, get rid of it. Or maybe it's, not as helpful as you thought it would be. So you want to try something different. And the most common pitfall I see here is that treating AI implementation as a technology project rather than a whole organizational mind shift change is probably underselling the value of what AI can do for your business. Successful adoption really requires not just the right tools, but attention to your team's capabilities, the workflow adjustments that are going to happen, the like vision of your company, maybe, depending on what that is. And then clear, really, really clear frameworks for how you can use it and manage it ethically and securely. And so remember that AI strategy isn't a one-time exercise, but it's going to have to be an ongoing process that you engage with at some sort of regular cadence. And it'd be good to figure out what that cadence is. And that most successful organizations establish some sort of regular oversight, both with their team members and with the people that manage the tool so that they know what's working and can adjust. And if we think about that timeline over the 70 years that AI sort of started to pop up, tons of changes happened, right? And I expect that it's only going to get worse in some ways of speed to market and the way that's going to change for our businesses. And so if we take an agile approach where we check in regularly and we really ask questions of the people that are impacted or using it, that allows us to stay on top of when the next part of the AI trend comes into play. There's a lot of conversation right now about agile AI, which I won't get into here, but if you want to have a little snippet of what's potentially coming, that's a great thing to Google and kind of look at. And so, what are some practical AI implementation tips? So, it can be overwhelming. Let me give you a couple high level things that help you use AI most effectively. First is that you need to figure out how to effectively communicate with AI. AI is, in fact, a language all on its own. And if you have any experience in the past with Boolean terms, then you are going to be set up for success. If not, you should Google that too. That can kind of help you with how to talk to AI. But basically, it's using really specific terms and having things like and, or not as part of your sentences, structure, paragraphs that you use to the AI. It's smart enough to know bullet points and paragraphs. So whatever feels good for you as a narrative is great. But those Boolean search terms can really, or the way that you used to use Boolean search terms can help you think about how to deal with the bot language. Then we get to really making sure you have your workflow assessment. So start mapping out that current workflow and identify your bottlenecks rather than just jumping in with AI in random places, which we've already talked about. So I'm not going to talk about that too long. And then really go back to automation first. So before jumping into that advanced AI model, make sure that you have handled the basics of automation. If you don't have systems in place for that, those routine tasks, then it sometimes is much, much more difficult to then layer on the AI component. If you think about that phone call example from earlier, if you already have the automated systems set up to say press one, press two, then it's easier to then incorporate the AI into that because now the AI is the press one, press two is AI's job in the background, right? But if you don't have that, then you have to build both of them in together, the parameters of how you want AI to work, and then also what it does in the foreground with your customer or employee or business or whatever that looks like. And then the last one is get non-AI practical. Think about what non-AI hurdles you have. Like I said, do you have a resource constraint? Like you don't have the right person to help you put this thing forward. Or maybe there's another software that's causing you some difficulty. Or maybe it's back to that clean data comment I made. Maybe you need to clean up your data sources first so that AI has really clearer parameters and understanding of what's going on in your systems. And so before using AI to analyze that customer feedback, maybe as you're getting, emails or I don't know how your customer feedback comes in, conversations, whatever, you can make sure you have a systematic way to collect that feedback, right? And so if it's not already automated, how that comes in, then you can do that first. And then I just want to touch base back a little bit deeper now that we have more of that parameters on the risks and limitations. So this is sort of in the ethical and safety perspectives. And I think it's a really important conversation for us to have because we don't want our businesses to be at risk. I used to work in a security company, and we found that the number one way that businesses got hacked was not their own systems. It was a vendor that they onboarded into their business who hadn't done the work. And so it's really important that as you think about data privacy and some of these other security concerns with AI, you're protecting your own company information and data as much as your customers. And so every piece of information you feed into AI tools could potentially be stored somewhere on external servers. And you just want to be aware of where they're going and what other people are doing with that. You also want to think about accuracy issues. I think we've all heard the hilarious stories at this point of some of the more rudimentary AI telling you things that are definitely not true. So just really be cautious and double check when it's really, really important. You have bias concerns. Like we talked about, it can't tell that the room is on fire. And so if AI only exists in blue rooms, it will think the whole world is blue. But that's not necessarily true, right? So as you're critically thinking about how you're building your AI into your workflows, even taking on the tools that are there, I would recommend looking into a little bit of what their data sources are, how they built that, and then taking that into consideration as to how that's going to affect what it's telling you to do as part of your business. It's not always going to be correct in the recommendations it has or how you implement it. And so I don't want to say your gut is always right because that's actually a false dichotomy that we see in the medical space right now is that doctors or medical professionals think they're more accurate than AI when AI has like a whole world of encyclopedias to search through and get answers from. But I do think that you know the special sauce for your business and what you want the vision to be. And AI can help you define that, but it can't replace being the person that believes in the mission and actually puts that forward. And then every touch point is crucial. I cannot say this enough. Every time you interact with or implement AI, you're going to have a potential point of failure in something, whether it's the process, the connections, the interaction. So just be cautious. And finally, think about those ethical concerns. Am I comfortable telling my customers how I used AI in my business, in my process, with their data? So I know we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to come over here to this 15-minute assessment. I really have 4 action steps you can take right now, but I want to talk a little bit about what you can do. So the first, and this is a great one if you take pictures of spreadsheets or not spreadsheets, presentations and stuff. When the slide is full, I'll pause for a second. It's a good one to take a picture of. But you can do this in 15 minutes. You can kind of get a handle on things. The first thing, take 5 minutes to do value mapping. What are my 3 highest value business activities? And what are the things that overlap with the highest value bottlenecks to my business? The second is friction. So for each of those high value bottlenecks, where is the friction point? And you can ask really specific questions like, is my work slowing down? Is it errors or is it human judgment that is being kind of faulty there? Or even wasted, right? Like maybe that's something that we can just have AI automate out. And then finally, and this is where if you want to take a picture, this is a great moment to take a picture, but that impact assessment. So for each of those points, what are the hours that you're spending weekly on this activity? What is the direct revenue impact? And what is the complexity of that potentially automated task? Really figuring out what is the feasibility of doing it and what's the feasibility of doing it right now. So once you do that readiness assessment, you're going to kind of run into process development, which we talked about. So I'm just going to kind of skip over this. And you're also going to go into thinking about who do I need to do this? Is it a specialist consultant? Is it training for a current employee? Is it something I can completely handle? I just need time to do it. But what are the resources that you need to do it really well? And then finally, just start small. I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by the breadth of what's possible, and you can just choose something small or at least contain a project into a really small implementation to be able to accomplish something really big with AI. And so with that, I work with businesses to develop their marketing strategies and fix their processes and figure out all these things all the time. And we use a lot of AI tools to do it. We ensure that businesses have the foundation in place they need for successful implementation. And we really like to work with business leaders to be that strategic partner. As part of this presentation, I worked closely with another great local business called Growth Up Partners. They're also all about AI and AI training specifically. And so if you're looking at having some questions or wanting extra resources, support, help, whatever, they're another excellent source of information that you can use to really figure out what's right for your business. And that's really it in a 45-minute nutshell. I mean, it's really complicated AI and it's also really simple. It can kind of go both ways. And so if you have a strategic plan, you can really know how to thrive with AI as a partner, as for whatever your big business goal is. So I'd love to take whatever questions. I saw a few pop up as I was talking, but I'd love to hear from you and talk about any questions you have that we might be able to talk about. Should I just look in the chat, Anna?
Yeah, I think there's one question in the chat from Roxanne. She said, can you speak to any of the environmental or ethical considerations of using AI? I know you touched on that a little bit already.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about environmental too. It's really a complex ethical question, and I don't have a right or wrong answer, but I'll tell you what I do know. So the environmental impact is pretty large, but it is for any piece of data. So literally anything you do digitally has a footprint, and that footprint has to be stored somewhere. And there are tons and tons of data storage containers that are literally just like servers and servers and servers and servers that hold all of our data footprint throughout the world. With AI, the amount of content that we create, content meaning data pieces, right? Little digital footprints, have exponentially expanded, which means that those data sources are going to need to exponentially expand. Now, as part of that, there's a lot of water being used because they have to keep those facilities cool, those systems cool. There's a lot of air conditioning. Sometimes there's boats involved. There's like data sources out in the middle of the ocean trying to keep them cool naturally. And so there are a lot of environmental concerns with what AI means for the future of our environment, as well as the ethical considerations of sharing maybe NDA information or private information, or even like PPI. Like I can only imagine how GDPR, it's a data protection program in the UK that has been implemented several years ago, giving people the right to their own privacy and information. I can only imagine how that's going to change based on the way AI involves and interacts, and how you kind of lose track of where all that stuff goes. And so this is a really big concern and part of a really big conversation within the industry. And so I would say as a business, think about what your values are and where you can protect yourself as well as your customer, and make smart choices based on that value set. It's always good to be informed and to keep looking into this and making your own decisions. But long, long ago, I worked with a real estate team at a tech company, and the conversation about paper towels versus hand dryers came up, and it was a big kerfuffle, as silly as it sounds. And there was a whole conversation here about like what's better for the environment. And there's one side that was like paper towels, because then you don't have like noise pollution and electricity and all these things. And then the other group was like hand dryers, because then you don't have cutting down trees and the paper mills and the actual like travel time with gas and energy of the vehicles, getting them from place to place. And the truth is, it's about a wash. And so figure out for yourself, what is that thing that I'm going to do stand for as a business, and how am I going to do my best job while this world changes really, really rapidly? That's a really good question.
Thank you, Rachel. That's great. I had a question for you. So once, businesses kind of go through your process, go through these steps of identifying, points where they believe that AI could be useful for them. What do you see? Because there's just such a wealth of tools out there. Like, how do you determine, you know what you need, but how do you determine which tool will fill that need for you? Besides
Yeah.
just Googling and hoping you get a good answer.
I mean, you could always use AI to figure out which AI works for you, right? I mean,
True.
kidding. So I personally like to get extremely practical. So if I have identified all these things, I run a really mini RFP for myself, request for proposal, which basically is just like, okay, what are the the minimum things I need to make this work. So maybe it is having an integration into your email system. So what is your email system? Is it Microsoft Outlook? Is it Google? Is it something specialized inside? Then that tool I select has to be able to integrate with this. What are the other pieces that it will touch? How big of an implementation is it? Do I have someone to do it for me? If no, then I need really great customer service at this place or an implementation team for the AI tool that I'm looking at. So I go through and I make a really practical list of what will it take to actually accomplish this, and what do I need the tool to be able to do in order to make this a reality. And then I do go to Google, or I ask a friend, or I whatever, and figure out what kind of tools are out there. And then I start the research to say, okay, does it check off my list? And at that point, if there's like multiple tools, we can kind of have a more value-based conversation. Does it seem, user friendly? Do I like what it looks like? Do I like the company values? Do I like that cheaper price tag? What are those things that I see? Maybe, your business value is getting on the forefront, so you have a good deal, but then that company's going to grow and expand and like lock in your good deal. Then maybe you look for those smaller looking companies that are got big roadmaps. And so that's how I like to be really practical with getting all of those things here, kind of written down into a list, and then going into what does it look like for me to actually grab a tool that makes sense for me, rather than picking a tool and forcing it into the problems or the business that may not quite fit right. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Is there any other questions?
Hey, I had a quick question. Knowing that sort of the business case from the AI company side is still in the works, like OpenAI and these other big players in this space, everything's free right now. It's free, or it's $20 for the premium. And so obviously down the road at some point, they're going to have to charge for this or figure out how to monetize it. So that that being said, what do you foresee as happening a few years down the line, where a small business might integrate AI pretty significantly into their business, and then the price becomes $1,000 a month or something that is not sustainable for them, and then they've created workflows and all these things based on it?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I'm going to kind of tackle it in two stages. The first is that this is the question of how does AI make money is where my conspiracy theorist comes out, where I'm just like, I don't want to be like an unsuspecting person who's like being taken advantage of with data and my own privacy and all these things. But the truth is that is the quandary of almost all businesses that start free, right? How do we keep the essence of who we are and serve a customer? And AI tools have a lot of options, from keeping a version free and having paid subscriptions to graduating up. We could see the Google model. Like right now, we think of Google as sort of a commodity, but actually, like because it's free, right? To use the internet is free. Pick your platform, your internet browser. But they use us to monetize, right? So we've lost a lot of our own privacy and a lot of our own autonomy of our personal information in the engagement of using even your basic access point to information in the world. So I think that from that perspective, it is almost inevitable, in my personal opinion, that there will be some form of that with AI as we grow and expand. The question is where and how much, which is, I think, is really where you're getting to. And so I'm going to give you the Debbie Downer first, which is that I think that there will be some places where you're just going to get caught in a tough place, and you're going to have to figure out how to deal with the expense that suddenly comes to your business if you've so deeply ingrained it in a process, in emotion, in something that you offer, that you just need to maintain that. You do always have options, though. You can choose to invest in a homegrown build, which I do not recommend for most businesses as a starting point of what to do. I think that that's not a good use of your resources unless you're dealing with highly secure information or extremely specialized processes. You also can choose to switch. That happened to me, honestly, just a couple months ago, where a company decided to raise their prices by 150%. And I was like, absolutely not. I refuse on principle. And so I had to switch entire platforms. And I'm still in the process of fixing it and figuring out how to use it in its fullest capacity. No, it wasn't Honeybook, but they are a good example as well of like a real bait and switch. And so I've been trying to figure out that too. So I think depending on what your business is or what you're putting together, it is not unreasonable to kind of put into your plan a backup plan as you start to build and choose. So what happens if this gets taken from us? We're going to do this other thing. We're going to double down. We're going to wait until it costs X amount, and then we're going to come out. We're going to fill in the blank. So that's what I would recommend as you're starting to scope that out, because it could be 5 years or it could be one, depending on what it is. And I do think that that's an important thing to really consider.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think there was another question from the chat. It says, can you go over clear giveaways? You will notice people used AI to create documents, emails, social media posts, etc., and how businesses can edit them to still look authentic and not look generic with AI, but still getting to, use that tool.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot of them recently, like with the M dash, which is actually a very fine and appropriate grammatical use in certain contexts. So I'm really mad that AI has co-opted that into something that is basically an indicator of, fakeness. There's also sort of a grandstanding that AI uses that uses a lot of business jargon, which I have a love-hate with. There's a lot of great business jargon that you use because it makes a real point. But also I love it because it doesn't actually communicate a point. So there's these little kind of tools in there. I would say there's a couple things you could do really quickly because I know we're almost at time. The first is that in the back end, and I'm assuming we're talking about like the chat GPTs and the Claudes and the like OpenAI kind of stuff, but in the background, you can actually program it for what you want it to use. And you can just put in a sentence that's simply, I want you to avoid using traditional AI speak like M dashes, grandstanding, jargon. My tone is this. I talk like this. Please always respond to me in this way. And then that from baseline should reshift or kind of parameter place how it should engage with you. The other thing, though, is that 100% all the time, without fail, my recommendation is that we always personalize what it says to us. We should never be publishing something that we haven't, at the very least, read through ourselves from AI and validated what needs to be validated to make sure it's actually correct. And so in that way, you can find those little moments where you're like, that doesn't sound like me. That doesn't sound like my business. And if you don't know what your business tone or brand or kind of like guidelines are, that's actually a great reason to talk to me. That wasn't even the point of this like entire webinar, but that is exactly what I do is I help businesses figure out those things and then make sure they have those guidelines in place so that they can be really successful and consistent in those uses. And so those are the two things I would say is put that little sentence in the background and then make sure you're always reviewing it and editing it so it does in fact sound like you without having to do a whole, fresh creation by yourself.